follow-up can account for 30 to 40% of the more sales you will get if you actually engage with it. If you're not capitalizing on a strategic follow-up process and being very careful about what you do and do not say, you are not maximizing your potential. But the best way to follow up is via a phone call. Just because someone doesn't have your product or service or you as a salesperson or your company top of mind enough that they are reaching out to you does not mean that they still do not have a problem that is a real concern that they want fixing. Embrace that. Follow up with people who expressed interest. You are doing them a favor, not a disservice. So just understand this entirely. Embrace it. Prospects who would buy from you anyway want you to follow up with them. Welcome, everyone, to the Close More Sales podcast. On today's episode, we are going to dive deep into the tactics of follow-up in sales and how to avoid the most common mistakes you might accidentally be making that are costing you a ton of money. We'll cover why follow-ups are crucial, what you should say during these calls, and why using the phone is way more effective, basically, than text or email or anything else you're doing to follow up. We'll also tackle the common fear of being annoying or bothering your prospects. Now, this episode is packed to the gills with value and should not only change how you approach follow-ups, but make sure you're not committing the follow-up sins that even great closers can sometimes commit by accident. The purpose of this show is to empower sales professionals and entrepreneurs to push themselves to grow, achieve unimaginable success without burning out, and ultimately transform their lives. I'm Ian Ross, and I am obsessed with all things sales, and I work with teams across the English-speaking world to make more money by asking better questions. The most proven path to achieving financial freedom is maximizing your earning potential, and a sales role is the lowest barrier with the highest possible ceiling for entry onto that path. Anyone can become a killer salesperson with the right techniques, mindset, and consistency. Everything we cover on this podcast is geared toward one thing: helping you close more sales so you can live the life you want. We are still in the growth stage for this podcast, so if you get any value from this episode today, which I am confident you will, follow, subscribe, all that jazz. And if you would like to get a sheet breaking down all of the things we actually say in a follow-up call, a template that's designed for you, text follow up to 33777. That's FOLLOW space UP to 33777. Now, let's talk about following up. Ideally, all of us would love to close every single prospect every time we speak. In fact, on our very first interaction, that would be amazing. In fact, I would argue we should be in pursuit of as few conversations as possible to be able to close the sale. But just because we are in pursuit of an ideal doesn't mean we shouldn't account for reality. In fact, I would argue it is our job as sales professionals and entrepreneurs to make sure we are actually operating as effectively as possible within the confines of reality. I wish everything went perfectly every single time, but we need to prepare for the real world. And in the real world, follow-up is part of a sales role. So, if follow-up is part of sales, we have to understand that it's part of the process. It's just how things work. So, if you neglect follow-up, it means you are leaving significant money on the table. And I found out very recently that so many companies, not just individual salespeople, whole organizations don't have a clear follow-up process. And not only do they not have a clear follow-up process, even if they did have a specific cadence on exactly when to follow up and how to reach back out, and should you call this time, should you text this time, even if they had that, which they probably don't, they still don't train their people on what to say in those conversations. And most importantly, what not to say, how to start that conversation, how to get the prospect you are following up with talking in a way that you can capitalize on to make some revenue for your company. So here's an interesting statistic. In basically different industries within sales where you're having salespeople, there's different percentages of revenue that are made in the follow-up. In the industries or with a company that does not prioritize follow-up, so not a long cycle B2B role, not trying to get someone to use you as a realtor or something, in roles that are far more transactional, where they actually tend to close the majority of people on more or less the first or second call, assuming there's no follow-up process, assuming it required 2 calls. In those industries, still, follow-up can account for 30 to 40% of the more sales you will get if you actually engage with it. In some industries, it is significantly higher than 30 to 40%. So if the industry you are in, even if it doesn't require multiple touch points often to close a sale, it means that if you're not maximizing the way you do this and being strategic and intentional with what you say when you get someone back on the phone after you've talked to them before, if you're not capitalizing on a strategic follow-up process and being very careful about what you do and do not say, you are not maximizing your potential. That's just a clear point. Just get that in your head. If you're not strategic about this, you're not maximizing what you do. So once we embrace that, now we have to think about how can we do this? What should we be saying? How should we be approaching this? And that's what I'm going to get into now. First thing is first. If you are going to be following up with someone, you could be following up via text, you could be following up via email, via cold DM, whatever. But the best way to follow up is via a phone call. It's by the telephone, by talking to someone verbally. So if you're better off, and because you're going to have a much better chance of actually converting, actually engaging with them with a phone call as compared to a text or an email, let's talk about the personal touch and the immediate engagement that a phone call provides as compared to a text or DM. When you're speaking to someone on the phone, when you're actually engaging with them, 2 main things tend to happen. One is you have the ability now to handle objections, concerns, hesitations in real time rather than your prospect thinking the thought and not engaging with you with that thought, not telling you what they're thinking and therefore preventing you from dealing with it. It might simply be, we're considering an alternative, and so we haven't pulled the trigger, but once I've decided what to do with the alternative, then I'll get back to the salesperson. That's what your prospect might think in their head if you reach out via text or email. However, you might know something that could shed more clarity as to why they should move forward with you and not that alternative. But you can't address that in any way, shape, or form if that happens via text, because your prospect will simply think it, they will not reveal it to you. Not only that, it's not even like they would text you that as a response. What most prospects do is just not respond. So if you're thinking people aren't answering you, why follow up when people don't respond? I would bet you're not calling people most of the time. So phone calls convey an urgency as well, in addition to being able to actually deal with what your prospect is thinking, what their concerns are, what their hesitations are. That gives you the ability to actually handle it right then and there. And also, the more personalized touch is key. I mean, it's really, really significant because rather than written communication, it shows I actually want to spend real time. I'm talking to you with my voice, with my time, rather than what so many people have become accustomed to in business in general now. And just consumers across America certainly are familiar with this, which is that they're getting reached out to in automated AI sequences. And so as AI continues to develop over time, it is an inevitability that people will naturally have more hesitation to moving forward with something via text, to taking that as seriously as an individual they had spoken to in the past, taking time out of their day to actually call them and have a conversation. So forget the idea that you want to text someone, you want to email someone. Focus on actually calling them. It builds stronger rapport and trust with your prospects. And there are some common misconceptions that salespeople have about follow-ups, which is part of the reason they're afraid to use the phone, is because they're afraid if you interrupt someone's day, especially if your industry is based on setting appointments, doing demos and presentations, that the prospect agreed to a set time to be able to do that, which is an ideal way to run a business. If you're used to usually having sales conversations around a set time, let's say you're a high-ticket closer or you're a account executive at a B2B company, right? You're used to this approach. Therefore, if that's how you're used to actually selling, you have a fear, I'm sure, as well as many other people, even people who do constantly do outreach, they have a fear that they will be annoying or be bothering their prospects if they interrupt their day for a call. I want to dispel this myth entirely right now. Follow-ups demonstrate persistence and commitment to your process and solving your prospect's problem. It's not inherently annoying. Your prospect gets annoyed with you if you do one or mostly two things. If you don't provide any actual real value or give any actual reason for why you're calling. If you just generally are ringing their phone or ringing their doorbell or lighting up their inbox without any actual value provided, any actual reason for the call other than I am now following up with you, and we'll get to that more in a second. Or if you are tone deaf in the timing and the frequency with which you engage with them. If someone tells you, I am not interested in this whatsoever right now, and you follow up every single weekday for the next 2 weeks after that, you will annoy them. And so many salespeople don't understand that someone effectively disqualified themselves from being engaged with your process, and yet they still got engaged with because of the automation at your company, just the lack of leads in general and being told to follow up with them. And so therefore you dealt with an annoyed prospect one time and therefore associate your persistence with annoying the person you reach out to across the board. And that is just not true. The amount of times I have been thanked by a prospect for following up, I genuinely appreciate you following up. Thanks for the follow-up. Sometimes it's right at the start. Sometimes it's later via text. But people who are interested, who want your thing, thank you for following up. By the way, how do I also know this besides experiencing it myself? I do it as well because I'm reached out to all the time. People sell me stuff constantly. And if I was genuinely interested, I thank them for following up. Why do I thank them? Because I am busy. I'm a busy person, and your prospects are as well. This salesperson was not at the top of mind for me, even though I still had the problem I had not yet fixed. And this is something you need to understand as a professional in this role, is that just because someone doesn't have your product or service or you as a salesperson or your company top of mind enough that they are reaching out to you does not mean that they still do not have a problem that is a real concern that they want fixing. It just means they're busy with other things. Could be busy with other things with their business. It could be busy with their personal life. It doesn't matter. The approach should be, if I can talk to someone and they are genuinely interested or motivated enough to sign up at all, choosing to be persistent and demonstrate my persistence through follow-up via the phone is a representation of that. Embrace that. Follow up with people who expressed interest. You are doing them a favor, not a disservice. So just understand this entirely. Embrace it. Prospects who would buy from you anyway want you to follow up with them. They might not want you to follow up with them every hour of every day, but they want you to check back in. So once you embrace that mindset, understand that I will be helping these people by following back up, It puts you in a position to continue to provide value by interrupting someone's day. Just because you interrupted someone's day right then, and the nature of an interruption, they weren't available right then, and they go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy right now, let's talk later. That doesn't actually mean they were brushing you off. It just meant that they might have been brushing you off, but they might have just been busy in that moment. So don't get discouraged just because the random time you reached out did not work for your prospect in that moment. Understand that if they are interested, you are doing them a favor by following up. Your persistence is to their benefit. Just embrace this idea going forward. So please just embrace this. So many successful people I know rely actually pretty heavily on follow-up to close deals. Far more than I do, actually. It's actually an area I probably need to improve on, to be honest with you, which is why I can talk about this so openly. 30% of my revenue does not come from following up. I'm highly focused on trying to get the sale when we're having our initial conversation, or at least our initial appointment. We might have talked once, set an appointment, and now that we're talking again, this is trying to close it. And that can be a matter of lead flow, what you're doing at the company, right? But understand that if you're not maximizing your follow-up, you're leaving money at the table. If that is embraced, that idea, and you're not bothering the people, you're actually providing value by being persistent to help solve their problem. Let's get into what to say during these follow-ups. But more importantly, what should you avoid saying? So what are the two most deadly phrases? They're poison to your process. If you say, probably the two most common things salespeople say when they're following up. And those of you who have been through some serious sales training or some of our sales training will know this right away. This will stand out to you, hopefully, or something's wrong on our part if this doesn't stand out to you. They don't say, I'm just following up, and they do not say, I'm just checking in. These phrases fail to differentiate you from every other salesperson on the market. They show that you have no initiative, you have no urgency, and you have no value with your time. You're just like, I am just following up. There's nothing personalized. There's nothing actually professional in it, and it lacks a clear purpose. It lowers your status in the mind of the prospect to do this because it implies that you have nothing better to do than just follow up. So always have a specific reason for your call. Let's talk about some effective follow-up lines. One of my favorite lines is simply like, hey, let's say we've already started talking and saying, the reason for my call today is we're about to change our pricing for July. And I know that when we spoke, we spoke about different pricing options. Is it worth us continuing to have a conversation again about how we could help you? That's it. That's all I got to do to start sometimes. And what's clear is it should be true, right? Don't just make something up to follow up because then you're running a risk because if they think, why did this person tell me the pricing is changing when it's clearly not? That's a problem. But this example, that's a perfect example. And the month could just be, if it's being released in July, if it's June, say the next month, or say the month you're currently in. It's probably better, is to have some urgency based on the month you're in. Hey, this is our last month we're doing this, but say the month itself. Don't just say this is the last month because then it doesn't feel real. So if it's May, say May's the last month we're keeping this pricing. If it's July, say July. If December, or even if it's December, say this year, right? But this is a key point. And in the template we have, there's a lot of places, the reason we call it a template, where you can switch out what is important or relevant to you right now. So what's another example? I'll give you one. It could just be, I just saw relevant news to them or event, right? Just let's say I'm talking to a real estate investor and I just saw that interest rates are about to go up, right? So I could just say, hey, I just saw the news that they announced that interest rates are about to go up, and because of reason. So the reason could be something that I had in my CRM, knowing that because the person had listed that interest rates were a concern for them in the past, I could see it in my CRM. Again, this is follow-up. I would bring that up. So I would say, hey, I just saw that interest rates are going to go up again, and because of the last time we spoke, you had mentioned interest rates were important to how you do business. I realized we haven't spoken in 3 weeks, and since our company is about to change how we do things, or about to change our pricing, or about to change our offering, or about to offer a new thing, right? Showing that urgency. I thought it would be worth us having a conversation again. If you don't mind me asking, what's changed since, and then some info about their last conversation. It's okay. What's changed since we last spoke 3 weeks ago? Or what's changed since, you hired that person you told me you're going to hire? That's how you start a follow-up call. Let's give another example. Hey, this is Ian. I wanted to talk to you because it's July, so halfway through the summer. And I remember from our last conversation, you were trying to increase how much money you were making going into Q3. My question's pretty simple. How's that goal of increasing your revenue? I think it was doubling your revenue. How's that going for the rest of this year? That's a follow-up, because it had specific things that were important to them that had urgency and time orientation. And what was clear in that was nothing in regards to my company. That was another example. That was something where I can use the notes, something that was important to the prospect, and fill in the blank there. We've got all this in the sheet again. So another one, I'll give you one more. It's like, hey, name, right? Because that's how we put stuff in our templates. Hey, name. So, hey, John, I just realized we had some changes at Disruptors, my company. That would be the term there. I just realized we had some changes at Disruptors. I don't think I told you about them, so I thought I'd give you a call. Before I get into that, though, I remember you were dealing with like issue 1 and issue 2. How's the progress been on those issues so far this year? Is this hitting home? Is the power of this hitting you? I'll give you another one. Hey, name. So, hey, John, I wanted to reach out because, we recently launched a new feature that I think could solve an issue you mentioned. I remembered you mentioned this specific issue before. Is it worth us scheduling another time to discuss how the new feature could actually benefit you guys? Another follow-up one. I noticed your competitor or industry trend, right? This is I noticed one. So I noticed, let's just say, I'm talking to AB company, and I noticed their biggest competitor is DC, right? So I could be like, oh, I noticed your DC, this DC company is causing changes in the industry recently with how they're doing things. I thought it might impact your business. We're offering some new things at my company to help people or companies, depending on who you're talking to. So helping companies deal with competitors that are changing stuff that could affect how they do things to make sure they stay ahead of the curve. Is it worth us chatting about that? Or, hey, name, we're running a brand new promotion for July, and I believe this would be a perfect fit for dealing with that issue you'd mentioned before the last time we spoke. Because I remember you were looking for X to try and help you with Y. Now, I remember you were looking for a specific product or service because you were trying to deal with this Y problem. Now is probably not a good time for us to revisit that conversation. We've got over 10 of these examples, okay? Because this is what is different than what you are currently doing. Hey, it's Ian. I'm just following up. I know we talked before. Has anything changed? That's nothing. That's nothing. There's no differentiation. There's no urgency. There's nothing personalized. As opposed to, hey, John, I remember last time we spoke, you were concerned about interest rates changing the last time we talked. And I'm kind of calling because I've got some good news and I've got bad news. Which one did you want to hear first? And then they go, whatever it is, you can prepare. I mean, we have that in our template about like how to figure out how to present stuff. So is this hitting home? How is this different than what you were currently doing? It's personalized. It's customized. It has urgency, and there's a reason for the call. There's something urgent. There's something new. There's something valuable. If the urgency isn't associated with your company and what you guys are doing, the urgency should be associated with something related to what your prospect said in the past. This is why it's important to keep notes on things, right? It's important to actually keep notes. Because it's not just for middle management. You're not just appeasing middle management as a salesperson by filling in the CRM. You are actually giving yourself tools to close more deals later. If you embrace this idea, you should be better at keeping notes, specifically keeping notes around their pain points or their concerns or what they said their hesitations are or their competitors or what they said is important to them. Because if they had said it was important to them before, when I follow up, I'm going to bring it up again because it immediately feels personalized to them and differentiates myself from everyone else calling them. And I can position something with urgency as related to that thing, to that problem, to that concern, to that thing that they had said is important. I can position the reason the call is directly related to that. And so now they're willing to engage with me. You guys understand the difference here? It's massively different. This is the tactical thing of how to follow up. So avoid being vague, right? Don't sound unsure as to why you're calling unless that's a strategic point. That's a whole other thing. We've got a whole other training about, let's say here's a little heads up. If you're a brand new sales rep and you're being given older leads that didn't close in the past, confusion is the perfect thing to call about. So it could be, hey, John, I've just got your notes came across my desk here. I think we dropped the ball or something happened. And my job is simply to have a conversation with you because I think we messed up somewhere. I don't even know if it makes sense for us to talk to you. Do you even remember us? That's a whole different point. But assuming you had the conversation, this is a really, really key point is you don't want to be vague about the reason unless you're being intentionally vague and that is the reason you're calling. It's an important point. Also, avoid overly aggressive and pushy language. I mean, I would say that at any point in the call, but it's all just a curiosity. There's an urgency. There's a reason I'm calling. Okay. Don't make the call just about you guys. That's a really key point. Don't call saying, hey, I'm calling you because we're doing something new. That's not interesting. If I say, I'm calling you because we're doing something new and I remembered you were looking for this new thing. That is what's important in following up. So if you're going to be following up frequently for whatever reason, maybe a lack of leads, maybe you've just been told to, whatever the reason, make sure you're not doing it without a clear purpose. And what is also, depending on how long it has been since you've talked to this person, the primary goal of a follow-up, and this is worth keeping in mind, is to actually set another appointment to then close the sale, not to officially close the sale on that follow-up call. This is the key distinction. Remember this and embrace it. What am I always doing at a sales process? I am always selling the next step of the process. I am not selling the outcome if I know there are 3 steps that need to happen first, because it's not a good practice to try and be getting someone towards the end if I have 3 things I need them to do first. I can create interest about the end result, but what am I selling? I'm selling the next step. So it is really unlikely, if it's been more than a couple of weeks, that the prospect currently has you, that same issue, or a budget in mind right then if you are interrupting their day via follow-up call. So you're being less effective than you could be if you're focusing on trying to close them right then and there. For the most part, this depends on your industry. It depends on a few factors that you're welcome to reach out if you have some questions based on your industry or how long it's been for most of your follow-ups. But for the most part, this is to sell an appointment to then have a conversation about whether or not you can help them. That's a far more effective process than, hey, I haven't talked to you in 2 months. Let me sell you something right now on the phone. That's a really key distinction. I have sold people that's been a long time following up. So let me make this clear distinction. Just because you have done that or because it's doable doesn't necessarily mean it's the ideal process. The person I closed who hadn't been reached out to in like almost 9 months, I sold them on like $1,000 course just on that call. That was great, but I can't build consistent business trying to be in pursuit of that process. That's a key point. I cannot build consistent business on being in pursuit of that process. I want to be orienting my conversation and orienting the call, the things I am saying, the things I am asking around the most optimal process most of the time. And if I get the one-off surprise sale, that's great. But be in pursuit of what is a best practice, what will help you be consistent over time. And then the surprise, sudden urgency should operate exactly as that, a surprise. That was a pleasurable little, oh, that was nice, that was great, that was easy. But for the most part, you want your commitment to an ideal process to be what drives what you do consistently. So tell them why you're calling. Tell them why you call and emphasize the importance of some type of urgency in that call to keep them interested and engaged with you. Tailor your message to their current situation. Personalize what you say based on some previous interaction. If you don't have notes, do your very best to reference like, hey, it has been 6 months, 6 years, whatever it is since we called you. And I know you guys are in this industry, and I wanted to make sure I could reach out to see if there's a way we could provide value. But this is the reason to take notes in your CRM. It's not just to appease middle management. This is exactly why also we created our template to give you what to say with areas for you to fill in to fill in those blanks based on your industry, your product or service, and what your CRM says for what their previous issues were, for when you last reached out. If you can do nothing else, you can simply include the list we have at the start of your follow-up calls and then go back to what you usually do. And if you want to get access to that template so you never have to say, hey, I'm just following up, or hey, yeah, I'm just checking in. If you ever want to make sure you never do that again, text follow up to 33777. That's 2 words, follow up to 33777. In today's episode, we delved into the critical role of follow-ups in the sales process. Because remember, follow-up, this is an integral part of sales. This is a reality we all have to face, and neglecting it means leaving significant money on the table. We talked about using the phone for follow-ups and how it's more effective than text or emails and why, and how follow-ups are not about you being annoying. They're not annoying your prospect, but it's showing persistence and commitment. We touched on the concept of what to actually say during follow-ups and what not to say. I want to end on this point. A sales role is the best damn job in the world. Don't let your friends, society, or pushy sales trainers in short shorts on social media convince you otherwise. This is a noble profession where you are helping people solve their problems and getting paid like a Beverly Hills surgeon to do so. If you feel like you are working hard, you're working hard at this, but your income isn't quite there yet, you can choose to learn the right techniques and apply them. Your success is in your hands, no one else's. And I think that is worth celebrating. That's why I love sales. I'm Ian Ross. This has been the Close More Sales Podcast.